Hello, welcome back to Monday Morning Mojo. I'm Anna Gibbs, and as always, I am so glad you're here. Today, we're going to talk about something that affects every single organization, every team, every business, whether you are a solopreneur, a small business owner, or leading a growing company. What we're going to talk about today is culture. And not the buzzword version, not the words on the wall version, but what culture really is and what culture is or how culture is experienced every day with the people around you, with the people in your organization, the people that you serve as customers and clients. Because here's the truth. You have culture. You already have culture, regardless of the size of your company. The only question is, have you been intentionally building it or has it sort of formed accidentally? And if you're a leader who cares about inclusivity, empowerment, engagement, performance, then certainly culture is not going to be optional for you. It's probably very foundational. And so, what I want to do today is just talk a little bit about what culture is. I want to talk through why so many leaders might struggle with it, why some leaders might not think enough about it or assume it's already in place. I want to explore how mission, vision, and values can shape your culture. And I really want to give you an opportunity to work on either designing your culture or possibly modifying one that you already have in place. But really, I want you to feel connected to a culture that truly supports everyone, your people, your teams, your business, as well as yourself. So I think one of the first things we have to talk about is the fact that culture is already happening in your business. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions I see is this idea that culture is going to happen all on its own, this idea that you can get back to it at another time, or possibly that maybe your business is even too small or too new to really talk about or develop your culture. So I just want to sort of, debunk all of that right now and really help you understand that culture doesn't wait for any of that. I think culture is being formed from the moment you start your business. I think culture is forming right now around you, and it's taking shape through the decisions you're making. It's taking shape when and how you decide you're going to speak to people, how you handle conflict, and what behaviors you might reward or ignore. Culture shows up in ways that we least expect. And I think that culture can also show up in ways that we plan for. And so when you think about the space you're creating around conversations, when you think about the standards in your company or organization, when you think about what happens internally, right? Who you give time to, who gets opportunity, when you look at how people are feeling as well as how they're performing, that's all culture in action. And so I think that culture is also not just what you value, but culture can also be what you tolerate. And so we have to be honest, right? If we tolerate any sort of disrespect, then obviously we're saying it's okay. And if we tolerate inconsistency, then confusion could become the norm. And if we tolerate, and sometimes this happens without even realizing, but if we tolerate an environment where being overwhelmed, overworked, and feeling burnt out seems normal, then obviously that becomes the culture too. And so we'd have to ask ourselves, how important is well-being to us? And so my point is that culture is always there. It's always developing. It's sort of, in the room before you are. And so whether you mean to or not, as a leader, we're always condoning it, teaching it, and really promoting it. And so I think that's the first thing I want us to understand. And so when we get clear about that, we can also get clearer about the language we use, because we don't want to create any misalignment. We want people to be clear about what we mean when we talk about our culture. And, at its core, I think culture becomes a lived experience. It becomes the lived experience of people working in your organization, people doing business with you, their experience is a reflection of your culture. So it's how people feel on a Monday morning and how they feel on a Friday night. It's how comfortable your team might be bringing certain concerns to you. It may be how people feel in your organization when they realize that they're off goal or they've made a mistake. It's also how they feel when they realize they're winning and succeeding. And so all of that is the experience they're feeling, and all of that is a reflection of your culture. And another thing that I think is important for us to understand about culture as leaders and as organizations is inclusivity. And, inclusivity is not just about who gets invited into a room or a conversation, but it's also about how the people feel once they are in the room. Because I think a lot of times when we talk about inclusivity, we think of it in terms of, opening the gate and allowing more people into the room or the conversation, which is great. But let's take it a step further and let's take a look at how inclusivity is really a part of the environment once they are in the room. Because if we have people who feel like they may not belong there, then are we really creating an inclusive environment? And I want to say this too. Sometimes this is done in a very unconscious way. I'm not saying that we go out of our way to create space around this or to create a sense of disconnection. But I think that sometimes this can happen and we're unaware. And so that's another reason why I'm bringing this up, because, as a leader and certainly as a coach and consultant, I spend a lot of time, I have a lot of conversations with people around these very topics. And that's why I thought this would be great for me to share with you today, because it sometimes takes that awareness for us to be able to get out of perhaps a blind spot we were standing in and take the opportunity now to create an environment that feels right for everyone. And so I guess a couple questions I would ask you about inclusivity is this. Once people are in the room, do they feel seen? Do they feel valued? Do they feel respected? Do they feel like it's okay to bring their ideas forward? Is it safe to create, or is it safe to give feedback? Is it okay to raise my concerns? Because inclusive cultures don't just allow differences, they actually leverage them. They actually recognize and appreciate those differences, leverage them. And I think in doing that, we create empowerment. And empowerment is really not about giving people, let's say, free reign or so much autonomy that it feels like no one's really in control or supporting the standards. But I do feel that empowerment is about giving people clear expectations, building trust, giving support, expecting accountability. That's all part of a healthy environment that feels empowered. And I believe that empowered people just know what's expected of them. They know what's expected of them in terms of the goals and the outcomes. And I think that it helps us to understand boundaries and even feel confident so that we can take ownership of what we're doing. And that can be super important. Another thing just to keep in mind too is that you can work very hard to create an inclusive culture, but if you're not then allowing for the empowerment, things can feel off and maybe even a little chaotic at times, because empowered cultures without the inclusivity then can also feel rigid. So you need both. You need, in order to create, I think, the healthiest culture, you need both. You need to be mindful and really focused on how to create an inclusive environment as well as develop an empowered environment. You need both. And those are some things that maybe you want to ask yourself in terms of your own organization. How do I establish that? How do I create space around that? You can ask some of your team members for their thoughts on it and their feedback. Because then the work continues now in terms of being purposeful about your culture. I think that, you have to be honest about the foundation you built in your business too. So in other words, how do you design culture on purpose? Well, I think it starts with some clarity around what you stand for. And I think that the clarity has to come from probably three foundational elements, which I'm sure you've heard these terms before. You might have even defined them already, but I think that the clarity has to come from mission, vision, and values. And so I want to break each one of these down. I think especially because we do hear these terms a lot, and I want to make sure that we are all connecting on really what this is and what it means to an organization. So a mission or a mission statement is basically a statement that helps everyone understand why your business exists. And your mission should probably answer some questions around not just why you exist, but really, I think, understanding what the purpose is and how to ground people in that purpose. I think that your mission is not just what you do or your title, but really the impact you're here to make. And that's an important part of a mission statement because this all will bring a lot of significance or meaning into the work that you do. And more importantly, as you grow your business and you want to attract clients and you want to hire people to begin building your teams, others need to understand the why behind what you do and behind the decisions you made. And so having a strong mission statement is really, really important. And even if you are, as I said, a solopreneur, you're just the one person running your business right now, you still need a mission statement because it gives you, I think, that true north. And again, you're even as a solopreneur, you're providing a product or a service. So you want to create a mission that helps other people see what your purpose is. And so you can ask yourself some questions around like, why did I start this business? Why does this company exist? And as you do grow your team, as you hire more people, everyone you ask should be able to give you pretty much the same answer. Because if they're giving you all different answers, then there's no clarity, right? So you have to create a clear mission statement that really everyone understands so that they can give you the same answer. Because again, if the mission is not clear, internally people feel disconnected. Well, externally too. Externally, your customers will feel disconnected because they're not going to understand what it is that you're here to accomplish or what it is that you're here to provide or how you want to serve them. And so again, when the mission is clear, everything becomes more significant, becomes more meaningful. And I think for a lot of us, that mission is so powerful because as we're building and working in our businesses every day, let's face it, some days are harder than others. Some days can be tough. And so when the mission is clear, then even on the hard days, we find the meaning. And that really is very important to help us get back on track. So we're talking about these three fundamental elements. So they're mission, vision, and values. So we talked about mission. Let's talk about vision. And vision, just like it sounds, it's really how you see things and it's where you're going. Vision is all about where your company is going. And so your vision statement should answer the question, where are we headed? And I think that the vision gives people something to move toward. I think that your vision should create momentum, alignment, even hope. And I think when people feel, again, like maybe the work gets harder or they're feeling disengaged somehow, that disengagement, if it goes on for too long, can really help them to feel unfocused and very unclear. And so I think a strong vision helps people to see that their role matters, that whatever they're here to do within your company, team, or organization matters to the big picture because they can see the vision and they see how they are part of the vision. They see how they fit into that. And I think they can also start to understand what growth looks like or how growth is going to come into play. Because when they can see where the organization is going, they're able to see how they fit better. And so truly without vision, I think we all start to stall out. And without vision, we can really head in the wrong direction. So having a vision statement is super important. And I will say that if you are the leader of the company or the team, if you're the owner, these are your vision statements and your mission statements. You get to create that because it's your company. And that is how you are going to attract people to you. And then the third one here that we're going to unpack is values. And values are basically the rules we live by. Values shape how we behave. And I think that this is where our culture can become real. I think that the values we identify with should never just be some descriptors or adjectives, right? They are behaviors, and we have to feel like we are in alignment with that, because your true values are going to show up whether you know what they are, whether you can name them or not. Your values are always in action, and your values show up in the things that you say. Your values show up in the things that you do, like hiring decisions, promotions, even how you give feedback, how you hold your team accountable, how you model leadership for the rest of them. All of that really has your values woven into it. And I will say this too. Here's the hard truth. You don't really get to choose your values as much as your values can reveal what you might tolerate. And so what I mean by that is, if you're allowing certain things to happen, if you're tolerating certain things that go against what you say your values are, I would have to question you, because are they truly your values? Because you're not living up to them. And so you have to be honest with yourself as a leader, as a business owner. What am I tolerating? Even as an only operator, as a sole operator in a business, you have to ask yourself, what disciplines am I putting into place? What habits am I building? What values do I align with, even as one person? And that's sometimes one of the more challenging parts of owning a business, is that a lot of us start as solopreneurs, and we have to find that we can hold ourselves accountable somehow. And I think oftentimes trying to hold ourselves accountable is very hard. And that's why I always recommend hiring a coach or having someone else help you with the accountability piece. Because I think if accountability is a value, but nothing happens when standards aren't met, then you're basically saying that accountability is not a value. So that's what I mean by allowing yourself to take a fair look, a fair and honest look at what you've been tolerating lately. Because no matter what you say to me about your values, you're revealing what your values truly are through what you tolerate. And so just take a look at that as well right now. And when you get into articulating or defining your values, just remember they should be very clear. They should feel like they connect with you, like they resonate with you. They should feel lived. In other words, your values are your values because you've experienced it and you see the importance or significance of it. It's not abstract, in other words. And it's modeled by your actions, by your leadership. Because if it's not, then it's just a bunch of words, right? On a piece of paper, on a wall, or a flyer. And so you have to understand that by putting it into action, by living through it, you are deepening the connection to those values, and you're stating very clearly that, yeah, these really are my values. And this really also, I think, is an important part of leadership, and sometimes why some leaders struggle. I think sometimes leaders struggle in the execution or application of a lot of these things that we've been talking about on this episode. And another important part of growing a business is hiring and attracting people. And think of it this way, even those of you who are listening and saying, oh no, I don't want to build a team. I don't want to build a team. I don't want to really have all that responsibility, or I don't want to scale my business any more than it's already at. I get that. But I'm sure that you have hired people that create leverage for you. So I'm sure that you have some sort of team or group of people who provide different support and services like bookkeeping or coaching or marketing. And so, there may not be employees in that sense, but they are people you've hired. And so I do want to talk a little bit about the hiring process, because at some point, every business owner has to hire someone. And hiring to culture doesn't have to mean that you're hiring people who look like you, talk like you, and act just like you. No, but you do have to understand that we need to be in alignment. And when we're not in alignment, that causes friction, and then it causes really a gap in what can be accomplished. And so cultural fit doesn't have to be where everyone's the same, but cultural fit has to be where our values align. And so again, my values and your values don't have to be exactly the same, but they have to line up. They have to feel like they can coexist in the same space. And this is so important, guys, because, I've been a sales leader, business leader now for over 30 years. I've done a lot of hiring and recruiting, a lot in the last, decade especially. And I will tell you that I can teach someone a lot of things, right? Skills can be taught, systems can be taught, technology can be learned. But what I can't teach someone is their character. I can't teach character and values alignment. That is something I can't do. So this is why it's so important, because values, when they're clear, I think hiring can become easier, and I think hiring can become healthier. And so I do use a lot of assessments in my hiring. As you know, I've talked about this here before. I'm a certified DISC consultant with the John Maxwell Company. And, DISC is one assessment. I've used others. I do think that using an assessment, behavioral assessment, and one that can help us understand what an individual values is really helpful in the hiring process. And while it may not be the beginning and the end of my decision, it does weigh and it does have a place in the process. And I think that, it helps us to understand more about how that person thinks. I think assessments help us understand more about that person's behavior. And some assessments do help the candidate actually articulate their values. So it's really helpful, because that is really, I think, where a lot of companies go sideways, is when team members are not in alignment with their values. And that causes big gaps for sure. And, the other thing that I want to move into now is to talk a little bit maybe more about leadership itself, actually. Culture is not pizza on Fridays. Culture is not a poster on the wall or, letters that spell some acronym. I think culture doesn't live in policies. It lives in how we get up every day and how we work together. I think culture is alive in our leadership. And so therefore, leaders don't just set the culture, they have to model it. Because one of the things we have to understand and appreciate about leadership is that while it comes with so many wonderful opportunities, it also comes with a big responsibility. And we have to accept that we are modeling for people all the time, and that people are watching us all the time. And so the way that we respond under pressure says a lot about our leadership and a lot about our culture. How we handle mistakes and how we receive feedback, how we speak about other people. And I think another thing that sometimes gets overlooked in this conversation is how we prioritize when things get busy. Because, we want to make sure that our audio and our video match. And so if I have conversations with my staff or my leadership team, and I'm helping them and teaching them, some skills around time management or understanding what their priorities are, and I'm holding them accountable to those big rocks or priorities, and even implementing, tools like a 411 form, which we can put in the show notes, a link for a 411 form. It's pretty simple to use. And it just helps you take your yearly goals, break it down into monthly goals, and then break it down into what you're doing each week, 1 week at a time. And what you're focused on each week really should just be your big rocks or your priorities. So if I'm doing all of that and expecting all of that with my team, with my staff, but I don't follow any of that, what am I saying? I'm out of integrity, right? I'm out of integrity with what I say is important if I'm not living it too. And so, yeah, being a leader comes with a lot of responsibility, because everyone's watching us and everyone is learning and modeling from us too. And so culture is reinforced in all these little small moments. It's not reinforced in a big speech. It's not even reinforced in this podcast. I mean, you're going to take a lot of this under advisement, but then you have to decide how you're going to live it out in your organization. And that's how you reinforce culture, is how you live it out, not just what you talk about. And, the last thing I'm going to touch on before we wrap up for this week is accountability. And I think that accountability, I've said this before, it's the secret sauce. It is what makes everything start to function at a higher level. True transparency. I'm not always ready for the accountability, but I know I need the accountability, because a true accountability conversation is not emotional. It's not punitive. It's where we look at the goal, we examine what we've been doing to get to that goal, and then a reality check about where we really are in the process. And so that we can celebrate our wins and preserve what is working, or examine why we're off track, why we might have a gap, and determine what the best strategy might be to get back on track. And then the conversation comes back again the next time around the accountability. See, accountability is sort of the glue, because you can spend time creating a mission statement, a vision statement, identify your values, but without the accountability, I guess we're just hoping that it works. They're just aspirations. I think that the accountability is the glue. And I believe that when you work to create, let's say, an environment where people feel empowered, again, everyone feeling empowered means that they get to stand in their own strengths and really work in a way that shows off their best traits. It doesn't mean we lack standards. I think that truly empowered cultures probably have very clear expectations. And so within that environment, the accountability has to be there. And that's when things get wonky, when we're afraid to hold other people accountable. And I think that truly more people than not want to know what the rules are, what the standards are. They want to know how they win here. They want to know how they win with you. They want to know what success looks like. And they want to know what happens if I miss the mark. And so all of those things become what starts to shape the accountability conversation. And I think when you have clearly defined culture, you're going to answer those questions. Because if you don't take the time to define your culture, someone else will. And it may not be in alignment with what you want or believe your culture should be. And so when you have an organization or a team or a business without this clear culture experience, it's very easy to feel like you get off track. You find that you're in misalignment with what you say you want. You can burn out fast. You can feel disengaged often. You might even find that team members or staff members don't stay with you long. There's high turnover. Obviously, without having the clarity around your culture and being clear about those standards, your leadership doesn't grow to the full potential that it could. And your leadership probably is going to be inconsistent, because I believe what will happen is you're going to start to react more than you start to guide and lead. And so your leadership will be very inconsistent, leaving people who work with you or for you feeling unnerved, right? Because they don't know what to expect. And one of the things that can definitely become a problem when you don't have that clarity around your culture is that I don't think you're working at your full capacity, and I don't think you're working at your full optimization. And so you start missing opportunities for growth, and you start missing opportunities to be innovative, and your company just can't scale at that point. And I believe that, after 35 years as a business leader, what I've seen happen a lot is that most culture problems are just clarity issues, that people can't engage because they don't understand what is expected. I think they start to check out. I'll say this, I don't think they check out because they don't care. I think they start to check out because they don't even know what's expected of them. And they find that there isn't that accountability to hold them to what they need to do. So they're not ever working at their highest standard or their highest level of productivity, because even on a subconscious level, they're like, well, it doesn't matter. No one's going to make me do it anyway. So they sort of start to disengage and check out a little bit. And if that goes on for too long, that could lead to what we know as quietly quitting, where people show up every day, but they're not really working at their full capacity. And so clarity is so important. I think clarity in leadership is everything. And I think that clarity right now in this conversation is what can build your culture. And so that's how you're going to define and design your culture on purpose. And that's really what the good news is. If you walk away with anything this week, I think it's that culture can be designed, and that your company culture, your organizational culture can be, I guess I'll say, tweaked. It can be revisited. It can be redesigned anytime. Now, I think that when you find the right structure, when you find the right and you get clear about that mission, vision, and values, that builds a very strong foundation where you can really stand on that for quite a while. And not to say that some things won't evolve over time, that's fine. But it's not like you have to, redefine your culture every 30 or 60 days. I think that when you are really clear, it feels pretty rock solid. And so while it doesn't have to be perfect, it does require intention. As you sit to design your culture, you just have to really be purposeful about it. And remember, these are the things you're going to touch on, right? Because as a leader or as an owner of your company, and again, this is going to be true whether you are the only employee or you have 1,000 employees. And the questions you want to answer is, why do we exist as a company? Where are we going, and how do we behave? Those were the three things we talked about in terms of mission, vision, and values. So that as you can define it, people have clarity, they feel connected to you, they feel engaged, even safe. As I talked about a little while ago, your employees need to feel it's safe to have their thoughts and feelings expressed. And you want people to feel empowered, because what will happen is that the mission, vision, and values that you design and create for your business becomes a shared language. As I said, it's not where everyone has their own set of mission, vision, and values. Everyone aligns with the one core. And so we have this shared language, and it creates something to anchor to, and it creates a foundation. And that's extremely important, especially when you have big periods of growth or when change shows up, especially change you didn't plan for. You want to know that you have something that grounds you. And so while it may be pretty solid, it could evolve over time. Just know that. Your culture doesn't have to change every day or every month, but it can evolve. And just like your leadership evolves, just like organizations evolve. And so I think the question is, are you evolving intentionally or reactively? And so what I have done for you, I've created a little workbook, a couple exercises. I won't even call it a whole workbook. There's a few pages here, you guys, but this is a really comprehensive guide to helping you build your company's culture. And I included in the guide a lot of things we talked about, what your mission, vision, and values are, how to create culture alignment, why it matters. And then I walk you through a few exercises to help you develop your mission statement, develop your vision statement, help you identify your company's values. And so that is available to you in the show notes. And you can create then a one-page company blueprint that you will use internally. You will use it to talk with your team and help them understand how to line up with it. It could be what you hire to. And so I think that this can be such an important exercise for all of you listening right now. So make sure you download this free blueprint to help you build your company's culture. And then, of course, once you go through all that, once you have completed the exercises, if that has sparked some new ideas, if you want to be able to explore some opportunities, or you feel like you need some deeper support, definitely schedule a discovery call with me. I just want to put that out there to you, that I work with people all over the globe, and I'm happy to work with you too. And so we'll have a link in the show notes too, where you can schedule a discovery session with me, and in 30 minutes, I can help you come up with a game plan. So take advantage of that, and that's also free in the show notes. Because what I want to do now as I wrap things up for you is assume that I have created some inspiration for you. I'm going to assume that you have some questions that you need to work on, that we've highlighted why culture is so important for you and your business, and for you to realize that this is part of the work of a leader. And leadership work certainly doesn't have to be done alone. You can gather your team together and do it. You can reach out to your coach or me if you don't have one. And I work with leaders and organizations who want to strengthen their culture all the time. I have a lot of experience with building teams and empowering teams and helping organizations and individuals clarify their mission, vision, and values, which is why I wanted to bring it to you today in this podcast. So again, if you'd like that kind of support, I invite you to schedule a time with me. I'm happy to do that. And of course, if any part of this conversation has lit you up or resonated with you, just realize that you're probably not alone. And I'm sure you have friends and colleagues who also are running teams or other businesses. And so right now, just take a moment and share this episode with them so that they can take advantage of this and have this conversation start to create some thoughts. And then they can download the blueprint and work on their company culture too. So I'm just so grateful you're here. I want to thank you for tuning in every week. I'm always delighted when I hear from you or I see you out in my marketplace and I have people stop me and thank me for the podcast. It's all for you. It's what I do to give back and lead myself, for me to lead with intention. That's why I do these episodes every week. So thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time on Monday Morning Mojo.